Sometimes quadratic equations do not factor. And we look at it and go, well, now what do I do? Well, one thing to recall with quadratic equations is this. Quadratic equations are x squared equations. So a little note, the little graph I want to make for just a moment here is quadratic equations could open up, but they could also open down. Let's use that for an example here. And when we're solving quadratic equations, we are looking for the solutions. Namely, we're trying to figure out where, there we go, where the two locations are where that parabola crosses the x-axis. Sometimes they come out nice. They're like 2 and 5. Sometimes they don't come out very nice. And they don't factor. And so we have this formula called the quadratic formula. And we use it when things are in the form ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0. And if we're not able to factor, or even if we are able to factor, this will still work. The solutions turn out to be x equals, and we read the formula as such. It's negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. Now you might be given that on your assessments as you go forward. It's also something good to memorize, especially if you're moving on into higher level math past Algebra 2 someday as well. And you'll see this again in other classes too. Let's talk about the formula. Let's break it down. This negative b, what's the purpose of this negative here? Well, that negative there makes b the opposite. So if b is 8, then that part becomes negative 8. If b is negative 7, then the opposite of negative 7 becomes positive 7. The plus and the minus is how we get our two answers. So basically, our two answers turn out to be the following. You don't have to write this down, but it would be negative b plus, plus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c over 2a. And the other answer would be negative b minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c over 2a. So one answer is going to have a positive here, the other answer is going to have a negative. Okay? So what's the purpose of the quadratic formula? Okay, well, the purpose of the quadratic formula, everybody, is this. It is used to find solutions to a quadratic equation. All right. Well, two main examples I want to look at together with you, and then the third we're going to talk a little bit about. All right. So you have this in your notes, but I'm going to showcase the quadratic formula here. We're going to jump down, and we're going to go through this first one here on the left. X squared plus 7x minus 2 equals 0. We could try to factor that. We could try to factor it using the x method. Or we could try to use this two sets of parentheses, and guess what? It's not ever going to factor. So what do? Well, step one, by the little check marks there, write the quadratic equation in standard form. Is it equal to 0? Yes. We'll put a little blue check mark to denote that. Now we have to find a, b, and c. Well, a is the number in front of x squared, which is a 1. So I'm gonna make a note here. A is 1. B is the number in front of x. Well, the number in front of x is 7, so B is 7. And C is the constant that's left. In this case, it's a negative 2. You have to be kind of careful with the signs there. Okay, so we've identified A, B, and C, and now our next objective is to substitute everything into this formula that sits right up here. Now I'll leave the x equals part off for the moment, just for the sake of space. So this is going to read as follows. It's going to say negative b, so negative 7. We write plus or minus the square roots of b squared. Now you'll notice in the formula I put b in parentheses. We always have to remember that we're going to square what the value of b. So in this case, it doesn't matter if it's in parentheses or not, because 7 squared and parentheses 7 squared is the same thing. Okay, if you want to get in the habit of doing this, that's fine. So then we go minus 4 times the value of a, which is 1, times the value of c, which is negative 2, all over 2 times the value of a, which again is 1. And I've done part 3. Now part 4 says simplify the expression inside the radical sign. And actually I'll simplify everything, but I kind of really want to focus on that because it might be the only thing that needs simplified. So I have this negative 7 sitting here, plus or minus the square root of, okay, here we go. This is how I like to do this. 7 squared is 49. Now, I have the following. Let me change to a different color here so you can see this. Okay, I have this negative and this negative. And all of those are multiplied together. So a negative times a negative is going to give me a positive in here. And 4 times 1 times 2 is 8. So that's that part. Now 2 times 1 on the bottom is just 2. Now I've almost done that 4th step. I need to simplify and put together what I can inside the radical. So I have negative 7 plus or minus the square root of 57 over 2. And that's actually our 2 answers right there. That does step 4. Now, we always have to look at the square root of 57. Does it factor? Meaning, can we simplify the radical? No, not in this case, which means we can't reduce it either. So this answer would be just fine. In fact, there's 2 answers. If you put this in a calculator, let me share with you how to do that. Okay? So to do that, I'm going to write out the 2 answers. So let me put a little squiggle right here. Our 2 answers are going to be as follows. One is going to be negative 7 plus the square root of 57 over 2. Now, if I use my handy-dandy calculator, I can put that as a fraction in my calculator, or I can do the numerator, hit equals, and then divide by 2, or I can put all of this in the parentheses and then divide by 2. So it doesn't matter how you do it. Let me see what I get. And let's round this to thousandths. So this would be 0.27. Now it's 49, so this is going to be 0.275. There's one answer. Okay. Now our second answer is going to be negative 7 minus the square root of 57 over 2. So that's going to be negative 7 minus the square root of 57. And then I'll cut that in half. For this one, I get negative 7.275. Okay. So sometimes we'll ask you to change it into a decimal. That kind of gives us a little better idea where it is on the number line. Sometimes we'll just leave it in simplest radical form. Let's look at the second one together. Second one together. 3x squared equals 6x minus 1. We have a big problem. It's not equal to 0. Okay. So thinking about our steps up top here, I'll erase the check marks by them. We've got to get it equal to 0 first, which means I'm going to subtract or add everything over to the left side. So it's 3x squared minus 6x plus 1 equals 0, and I'm ready to go. So I need to find A, B, and C next. All right, so let's save a little space here. A is going to be 3. B B is going to be negative 6, and C is going to be 1. And I plug things in up top to the quadratic formula again. Here we go. All right, this time we have a negative b. We're going to write that as a negative b. The value of b is negative 6. And then plus or minus the square root of b squared. And we need to, absolutely have to have, must see TV, negative 6 times negative 6 has to be in parentheses. Minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. We've plugged everything in. Now let's simplify. So negative times the negative 6 out front, that's just a 6, plus or minus. Negative 6 squared is 36. And 4 times 3 times 1 is 12. All over 2 times 3, which is 6. Now this simplifies to, get rid of this little tail right there. This comes down to the square root of 24 over 6. And so we look at that and go, hey, we're done. No, because the square root of 24 breaks down. And I'm going to do that up top, kind of in the middle here. See, the square root of 24 is really 4 times 6, or 2 square root of 6. So we're going to replace the square root of 24 by 2 square root of 6. That's going to give us 6 plus or minus 2 square root of 6 all over 6. And then what we can do here is we have to look at this 6, this 2, and this 6. They're all outside the radical. And can we divide the 6, the 2, and the 6 by one number? And the answer is yes, this 6 is going to become a 3. That 2 out front of the square root of 6 will become a 1. I don't need to write it, so I'll just write 1 square root of 6, understanding that it's a 1. And that 6 in the denominator becomes 3. That's my answer. Again, I can split that in 2. I can change it to decimals if I want to as well. All right, final one. Final one for you. Let's scoot on down to the bottom. We'll take the quadratic formula away from us for just a moment here. All right, we've got 2x squared plus 4x plus 7 equals 0. Take a moment, find your a, b, and c, and begin to plug things in. Now, something interesting is going to happen here, and we need to talk about that here in a moment. So take a moment and find your a, b, and c. Once you find your a, b, and c, go ahead and plug them in to the quadratic formula. Once you have that, go ahead and simplify inside the radical. And when you do, you get a negative number inside the square root. Well, what this results in is it results in what's known as a non-real solution. And this introduces you to something that you'll see in theory in Algebra 2. See, the square root of negative 40, if we try to put it in a calculator, there is no real number that we can take times itself that will give a negative number. Because a negative times a negative is positive. And a positive times a positive is positive. So what do we do? Well, more to that story later on. All right. That's the quadratic formula. Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. You got it. Thanks for watching.